Hi, this is Bill Varney from fishthesurf.com and your saltwater guide with your Thursday, June 12th surf fishing report. So once again, another great week of surf fishing. Just wanted to remind everybody that on our little tackle store, surffishtackle.com, we've got an Okuma rod and reel sale going on right now for light line surf fishing on the beach. If you're in the market for a new rod and reel, check it out. Some great deals there and everything that you need for using at the beach. So let's start all the way up in Morro Bay. I was up in Morro Bay fishing last weekend. Some fantastic perch fishing up there. Couldn't believe how good it was. But in order to get to the good fishing, I had to figure out what the fish were eating that day. So I started out with a Gamakatsu bait. I moved on to a gulp bait, no bites. There were millions of sand crabs. You could put your net in the water, wouldn't even have to take it down to the sand, and just washing back and forth with literally millions and millions of sand crabs. Lots of soft shells. Tried one soft shell, tried 3 soft shells, still didn't work. So I did a little digging in the sand, and what I found up there was sandworms, which we find all along the California coast. And when I dug those worms up, I noticed that they were full of grunion eggs. So obviously the grunion had run in Morro Bay. So I hooked on one of the worms, I cast it out, and within 3 or 4 seconds I hooked up with about a 13-inch barred perch, and then every single bait after that got a perch within, gosh, I say 5 to 10 seconds at the most. So fantastic perch fishing up there. And a lesson to learn there is that when you go to the beach, and I always do this, I always take more than one bait with me. When something's not working, really doesn't mean the fish are not there. It just means that they're either not biting then, or they're not biting the bait that you're presenting to them. So multiple baits when you go to the beach will always guarantee that you'll be successful. So making our way to Santa Barbara, like a wildfire, well, maybe that's not a good example, really turned on this week with some super hot halibut fishing, really heated up this week with fish up to 32 inches caught in Santa Barbara. Good fishing really all the way from the Mesa in downtown Santa Barbara all the way up the coast to Gaviota, all the way up right against the Hollister Ranch there. Provided some really good halibut fishing. A lot of sublegals, but quite a handful of legals too. And it really seemed like the best halibut fishing along the Santa Barbara area was above Gaviota, was Gaviota North, Goleta by the University North up to Gaviota, kind of in that zone, seemed to be where the bigger fish were. A lot are smaller fish below that along East Beach, Graveyards, Henry's, that area. And then we got some reports from Carpinteria this week. A lot of small perch there once again. Palm-sized perch have moved into that area. I know there'll be some corbina there in the not too distant future. And then as we make our way down the coast a little farther to La Conchita, you know, we've talked about mussel shoals, La Conchita being really good for perch fishing. Perch fishing continues there. Of course, the perch are smaller there. There's a ton of sand crabs on the beach, so lugworms, bloodworms, sand crabs, those are all working well along the beach in that area. But the news this week from La Conchita was a little bit south of La Conchita, a couple of nice sized corbina. So that really means that those corbina once again are moving north, and I think within a short time we're going to see them in that Carpinteria State Beach zone and then move their way further north there all the way into Santa Barbara. So as this water warms and we're going to get more swells from the south, that means that there's going to be more corbina moving north. We've got them all along the coast right now and really beginning to fill in, certainly in that Santa Barbara, that lower Santa Barbara area. There's been a few white sea bass in the count in Santa Barbara. They've all been sublegals. I think that might pick up. The reason for that is, of course, we've got grunion fry, anchovy, sardine right off the coast there in Santa Barbara. So there's a lot of food for them. They're probably there now because we're seeing a lot of catches at the Channel Islands, but they really haven't come in close to shore until some of that bait disappears up there and they get a little bit more hungry and come in a little closer to feed. So that's really good news up in Santa Barbara. And then as we make our way down to Ventura, you know, Ventura has remained very good for corbina fishing. It's really exploded everywhere from Corbina to the Mexican border in the last week or so, but it continues to be good in that area. One of the reasons that Ventura is so good is there's so many sand crabs up there. There's really a lot along the coast in general, but there's a big concentration up there, and that tends to really bring in those corbina. Of course, they're coming out of the bays and the estuaries, and now they're feeding, so that is a really good sign. And anglers catching the biggest fish have been the ones who have been using flies, fly anglers, and these anglers are fly fishermen using fly rods. But remember, you can also fish the fly, which is like an imitation sand crab, clouser minnow, a lot of different flies in that order, worms, things like that. You can fish those not only on the fly rod, but also on the spinning rod using the Carolina rig with a little longer leader, maybe a 36-inch leader, fishing those flies and then casting them out in a fan casting motion, 10, 12, 2, and slowly retrieving them to shore. So that's been a really good bite up there. And then halibut have really picked up along the entire Ventura area from C Street, really above that area, all the way up to Emma Woods, all the way down through Ventura and into Point Wainimi. And the best baits there, and really we've seen this all along the coast, but in particular from Malibu, let's say all the way up to Morro Bay or anywhere in between that, is halibut fishing has been really good on people that are using white flukes, white swim baits, white or light colored hard baits like Lucky Craft and Battlestar baits. All of those have worked in that area for halibut. And the reason for that, we talked about this a little bit last week, is that the halibut key in on those egg sacs from the squid, which are, oblong and about this size and bright white like a bed sheet, and that's really what they're keying in on. And we've seen that more and more now over the last couple of years. So that remains good in the Ventura area, really all the way up through Santa Barbara. We've had this good halibut fishing. And then one of the reasons that that's possible that it's been good, and really both for the corbina and the halibut in the Ventura area, is that this week anglers on the Ventura Pier were catching market-sized squid, perfect-sized squid, about this big, in the middle of the day right off the pier. So that means those squid are in close, and when that dissipates somewhat, those squid dissipate a little bit more, and once again going back to the white flukes and swim baits, when that dissipates a bit more, those halibut will come in closer to shore to feed on sand crabs, grunion fry, small perch, all those things. So look for that bite to even get better as time goes on. And then corbina in that area, we talked about that. Sand crabs, bloodworms have worked very effectively all along the Ventura coast. No specifically good areas, they're spread out all along the coast as those corbina go back and forth looking for something to eat. Once again this week, missing in action is Malibu. I really hope somebody watching from the Malibu area can send us a report. So if nothing else on a fishing report, maybe a water report, what they know about the closures, the openings, the quality of the water up in that area. If they see any red tide, we'd really love to hear from you up in that Malibu area. And then when we make our way down to the South Bay was very good this week again. Kind of that Venice, Santa Monica area was a bit slow, but when you look between Dockweiler and Marina del Rey, there was some really good fishing along that area for various kinds of surf perch, and walleye and barred obviously, and then some very good yellowfin croaker fishing there, once again on the lugworms and the softshell sand crabs in that area. So look for that to continue to be good. And then as I talked about before, this Hermosa Beach zone, and it is traditionally been good really all summer long, but in particular over the years, many years, in the spring, anywhere from the King Harbor breakwater, chart house, all the way down to the pier, all along in that zone, there's quite a few corbina. Had one angler catch 2 nice fish over 20 inches in one day up there, once again on those soft shell sand crabs. The anglers in Hermosa, Manhattan, Redondo, who are being successful in these big yellowfin croaker and these nice sized corbina, are the ones who are either fishing bloodworms or they're going down the day before they fish, collecting soft shell sand crabs and being ready the moment they get down that sand at that low light to fish right away, not wasting any time looking for bait. That's what you need to do to be a success. And then working our way down to Redondo, once again we got a report of several yellowfin croaker near the Sapphire Jetty, and between Sapphire and all the way down to Rat Beach, there's been yellowfin croaker biting in that area, and we look for that to continue. What's kind of interesting down there is that because we've had all these south swells and very little from the northwest, the surf's been very, very small in that Rat Beach area. Not a lot of water turning over, so it doesn't seem to be as active as other areas are. But as the summer goes on, look for that area, really that where the ramp is that comes down in Torrance Beach over to Palos Verdes at Rat Beach. Look for that area to concentrate more corbina and some nice perch over time in that area. And then always we're going to see striper down there throughout the summer looking for fish right in that corner there. So the South Bay remains good. I think it'll be even better as time goes on, as more and more softshell sand crabs make their way to the surface. And then we go to Orange County. Orange County was absolutely excellent this week. And I think, you know, one of the biggest stories this week in Orange County was the halibut fishing. Absolutely unbelievable. One angler, if we're looking at an area between, let's say, 72nd Street and Long Beach, the very edge of LA, Orange County, down to just about the other side of Huntington Harbor, Breakwater. The halibut fishing in that zone has been unbelievable. One angler went across the street into Los Alamitos Bay and picked up a bunch of live smelt, went across the street basically, fished right out there. On the first day, he got 30 sublegals and 4 legals, one over 30 inches. Went back the next day and got another 12 sublegals, and then when he ran out of bait, put on a couple of softshell sand crabs and caught 2 corbina. So that whole zone along there, and really we're talking about 72nd Street all the way through the Newport jetties to the Wedge, that's all got halibut in that zone in there. There's some concentrated areas we'll talk about in a second, other than others, but it's been good fishing there. Also along that area, a couple of spotfin croaker on bloodworms, and then quite a few corbina down in that area on softshell sand crabs. Once again, the anglers getting their bait in advance, preparing for the beach, getting there early, or fishing there later in the evening are doing very, very well on really palm-sized perch, and then a lot of different size corbinas, from those little ones of 12 inches all the way to the over 20-inch fish. So that remains really good down in Orange County. I don't see that changing a lot. And one thing to remember about that is that these fish, whether they're corbina or halibut, they often congregate in areas where their food congregates. So be sure to always keep that in mind. As we make our way down to San Diego, San Diego was absolutely on fire this week once again, with some great fishing in Oceanside, kicking out halibut, a couple of corbina, several nice spotfin croaker. That's been really good. Anglers there, once again, softshell sand crabs and bloodworms. Sometimes lugworms have also worked in that area. Those have all been working well along there. If we make our way down to Carlsbad, it's been relatively slow in Carlsbad for big fish. There's been a lot of palm size surf perch in that area, and a few yellowfin croaker. I think that will continue to get better as more sand fills in there and more bait fills in along the beach, because it really looks like the beaches that are very sandy, Mission Beach, Pacific Beach, they have had some unbelievable bites in the last really several weeks. And talking about those two beaches, Mission and Pacific, not only have they had good corbina fishing, and particularly on these softshell sand crabs and bloodworms, but the spotfin croaker fishing down there has been great. I saw 2 fish over 6 pounds this week from down there. Both of those on bloodworms. Bloodworms has really been the key bait. And that, I think, really is the biggest news in San Diego, is how good this spotfin croaker fishing has been. They've been getting spotfin croaker at Oceanside, Mission Beach, Pacific Beach, even at Torrey Pines this week there were some taken. I think all in all I saw over a dozen spotfin croaker taken this week in San Diego. So that will continue to get better once again as this warm water makes its way up the coast. And really the warmth inland is going to push all those spotfin croaker out of the back bays, the estuaries and all that, out into the surf line looking for food out there, and that will give you a great opportunity to catch them. I've seen them caught all different times during the day, but usually, once again, like the corbina in the morning, doesn't have to be at the very break of light, which a lot of times is when you find the best bite on corbina. Maybe a little later in the morning's okay, and then in the evening. Both of those times have been very, very good for spotfin croaker. So I wanted to remind everybody about my newsletter. If you haven't signed up for the newsletter, it comes out one time per month. You can go to the front page of fishthesurf.com. Sign up there, just put in your email. That's all we do is send you a newsletter on surf fishing. And please step on there and do that. If you need any surffish tackle whatsoever, surffishtackle.com. Remember that tonight and tomorrow night will be the last nights of this grunion run. It's an observation period now, which means you can't take any, you can't even touch them, but we will be able to collect them in the month of July, so that's coming up. We'll be talking about that in the future. And then one last tip I wanted to give everybody. This is so important. So halibut fishing, and as I said, corbina fishing too, but halibut in particular, all of these catches of halibut, or a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them that I've seen in the last couple of weeks, have all been in areas where there's basically a corner, where a jetty comes in and there's the beach, harbor wall comes in and there's a beach, anywhere where there's a corner, because those corners accumulate finfish. So anchovies, sardines, smelt, they get kind of hung up in that corner. It's almost like a defense against them because they've only got one escape. They kind of get hung up there. And then also when the grunion fry and those eggs hatch, those fry go right into the water, and often they get caught in those corners. So if you're surf fishing, and in particular fishing for halibut, look for those areas where jetties meet sand, fish those corners, where harbor entrances meet sand, where pier pilings meet sand. Each one of those edges that confine the bait in has a tendency not only for it to be blown in there and swim in there, but held in there too, where these fish come in and feed. You'll also find that with corbina on sand crabs, where sand crabs will often accumulate in those corners because they push up so much soft sand in that very corner itself. So that's the Surf Fish Report for this week, and until next week when I see you right here, I'll see you on the beach.